All right, so this wonderful speaker that's coming up next is somebody that's very dear to my heart. She's a Jackson Hole local. As long as I can remember, this girl has been around, and just was always something for me as I remembered as a kid, hearing her legendary name on the hill, and in our circle in the early 90s as snowboarders, and really inspiring me, especially on the race side of things, and then eventually on the free ride side of things, where she was pushing limits, whether you were male or female. This person, for me, was just something that I aspired to be. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Julie Zell to the stage. 3-time Queen of the Hill in Alaska, and Jackson Hole local. She's got her son Ronan up here. Also, he just won his first free ride contest this year, and this is the next generation of Zells coming up. And can you tell us a little bit about this crowd? Or there's a mic right there if you want to talk. There you go. We've got accoutrements, we've got the accessories of the Zell family.
Ronan really was interested in bringing these and making sure we show them off.
Oh my goodness.
So these were the trophies before the contests got into sharing.
Ronan, like this in front here. Wait. Let's start the thing. You got to cross the we're gonna lift up. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2. Julie Zell, everybody. I'll let you continue.
Anyway, these were the trophies before. I actually think this was the first one here that was made at the Morrow factory. Probably weighs about 15 pounds. 10 pounds? It's heavy when you're trying to hold it above your head and you had a couple drinks. So my sort of thing about snowboarding and talking, really I like to hopefully inspire people to do what's in their heart. And like Jeff said before, go out there and do what you're doing, because you never know what you're going to be the developer of, or what you're going to achieve and who you're going to inspire. So it's really important to follow your heart and follow your own path. So this is my path. Where it started. So I grew up in Syracuse, New York. This is my family. So I was the youngest of 8. Needless to say, I spent most of my life being told to hurry up. This is me, if you couldn't tell. This is our beloved Jimmy, who we lost a few years ago. He was a huge inspiration for me. This is Jeff, who might be horrified if he saw this evening. He didn't make it, but his wife is here. And Jerry up there, we're the bookends of the family. We hold them all together. Anyway, so we grew up skiing in Labrador Mountain. I was a ski racer. So who loves Esther Ledecky? She is my greatest hero, and if anybody had ever told me I could do both, I would have stuck with it. So I grew up on a little mountain, so you don't really need much, and that's kind of part of my point about this. Whether you're skiing or snowboarding, you don't need much. 700 vertical feet. We had a series of things that went on. We had a brother who was in the national freestyle. I don't know if any of you know anything about freestyle skiing in the 70s, but there was recently a viral video going around about ballet. I did it. So it was pouring rain, kind of slushing from the sky. And you'll notice, I don't know if you noticed in the last photo, that I did a lot of races where I don't have goggles on, I'm not wearing a hat, I don't know. So here's ballet, moguls, and aerials. This is about my greatest attempt at tricks. This was the iron cross, but I didn't quite make it to the bindings. This was the one before grabs were invented. And if you've been to any freeride comps lately, you'll realize how cool snowboarding has made skiing, by the way. The list of snowboarders is very short, so we need to inspire. There's no young girls snowboarding in the contest, which, by the way, I find very sad. So what came next? Quick rundown, I actually had ski scholarships, ski racing. There was such a thing. I went to Alaska in Juneau. They cut their ski team from the budget. I left school. I went back to New York. I got a scholarship in Montana. They cut their ski team from the budget. I stayed for a little longer, and then I withdrew. I wasn't sure if it was skiing or school that I wasn't supposed to be doing. So I moved to Hawaii, and I tried to surf, but the whole sideways thing sort of eluded me. And then I had a brother here. Jimmy, well, two brothers, Jimmy and Jeff, they'd already been here about 9 years, and Jimmy had won Honeycomb, the mini Honeycomb, here over at Snow King, if any of you know anything about that. They used to get up to, starting up at the Pro Start, 70, 80 miles an hour, right over there on that little slope. Anyway, I remember very clearly a phone call that he made. Oh my God, you gotta get out here, this place is amazing. I had spent just a couple days here on my way to Alaska when I was 18, and it was about 30 below, and the inversion had set in, and I never even saw the mountains until I got on the tram. That was my first run in Jackson Hole, because my brother assumed, because I was such a great skier, he should take me up the tram. Well, there was nobody here skiing those days, so powder lasted a long time. Anyway, he brought me up there, and this is where I landed a few years later, Jackson Hole. So I got here as a skier when I moved here in the winter of 89, 90. I drove out in a Ford Fiesta that I bought for my brother, and well, I really was not having such a good time trying to ski. I could not ski powder at all. There was no fat skis. My skis were probably 1/98 and about that wide. I kept seeing these snowboarders, and after trying to surf and paddling for a year, I kept thinking, you know what? I think that's my thing. So I learned to snowboard. I took a lot of beatings. There weren't really many teachers at the time. It never crossed my mind to take a lesson. Although once I did get the hang of it, I had some great teachers. So we had Robert Garrett, who I think I saw earlier, who I got the most amazing sense of surfy style from, because he's the surfer from California. And there was nothing I loved more than watching an RG come down. And I wanted to be a surfer, but I didn't grow up on the ocean. I grew up in the snow. There was only about 12 snowboarders here, maybe 15. I could go through a list of them. Mikey Franco was one of them, and we became absolutely best friends. There's a guy here named Chris Pappas at the time, and Chris said, hey, didn't you used to be a ski racer? So Chris gave me a snowboard. Oh, these are just some other photos. I started competing eventually. That's the cast graph. There's a cast underneath that mitten. Next one. Here we got Lance Pittman for any of the locals that know Lance. So here is Lance and I with our Aggression Stealth snowboards. They were terrifying, but as a ski racer, now I can't even consider getting on one of those, but as a ski racer, that was absolutely the most amazing carve I'd ever felt. I don't think I would ever step back on that thing, but I always used to feel like it could break me in half. So these were our old snowboard school uniforms. I quickly went, after my first year, into teaching out at the mountain, so I could get a pass. I lived the ski bum life. I had 3 jobs, and eventually I started traveling and going to competitions. I would pack those 3 jobs in from Monday morning to Friday midday. I'd get in my car and I would drive to a contest. So this I just had to add here on the race page, how I got into the racing. Big Head Todd and the Monsters used to be my sponsor. I was the first snowboarder sponsored by a rock and roller. That was just a me moment, sorry. All the free concerts I could stand, and a really cool downhill suit. I went to Breckenridge to try to get into my first pro race. That's where I met Sean White. He was 10 years old, traveling around in a van with his mom, being groomed to be the best snowboarder in the world. Apparently it worked. So Jeff talked a little bit about the early days of the Pro Tour. This is some of the early days of the Pro Tour, and another thing I'd like to say is that one of the oddest things I always thought was that Paul Mitchell was one of the best supporters of the snowboard industry in the early days of all the sponsors out there. We'd get hair products at every contest. It was really cool. They were little travel ones, so it was great when you were on the road. So quickly, my race career ended. I went out here on the hill. I jumped off a big rock. I landed in a hole that the guy that went off me, his name was Ox. I landed in his hole and I blew out my knee. Dr. Rourke told me, I kept telling him, listen, I can't not finish. This is the best season I've ever had. I didn't have meniscus damage. He let me strap on a knee brace and finish my season. But it turns out when you're wearing a knee brace and you have an injury, you can't really do gates and super Gs and race really hard anymore. So in comes the king of the hill. My sponsors at the time, Nidecker, I have no idea what the picture's next, but you can go to it, brother. When is the right time to go to Alaska? This is the part we were trying to get to. So my sponsors told me about this contest. They're like, oh, they're doing this thing instead of the extreme contest, they have this thing called the King of the Hill. King of the Hill, for those of you who don't know, was the World Extreme Comp for snowboarders. It was a downhill day, which of course I loved as a racer. Freestyle day, you were lucky if you could get me to do a full 360. I had to use the hip and do the 280. And extreme day, which I knew nothing about. So for those of you who are from Jackson Hole, my prep to go up, Big Wally was one of my greatest advocates, and he brought me down the hourglass and brought me in, and back in the day when none of the out-of-bounds terrain was open, the ski patrollers, if you were going to go there, you had to go with a ski patroller. And so I got to get into some pretty gnarly steep terrain with Big Wally, so I could do a little training before I got to Alaska. And just back up, my brothers had already been up there, Jim and Jeff, and they had both gotten second place behind Doug Coombs, or one behind Doug and one behind John Hunt, up in the World Extreme contests. And once again, Jimmy convinced me to come to Jackson Hole. Jimmy convinced me to go to Alaska. So the contest seemed like a great place, great time to go. So for those of you who haven't been to Alaska, when you drive from Valdez up to Thompson Pass, you see this off in the distance. My brother picked me up, we dropped our stuff off at the hotel. He wasn't allowed, he couldn't ski anymore, he had frostbit all his toes, which by the way, while he had someone else's feet, this other woman's feet in his armpits, saving someone else, well, he ruined his. But we hitchhiked, because that was how we were supposed to get up the pass. And this woman was playing Journey with these huge speakers blowing. It was a two-door sedan, I don't remember what kind of car. So the whole experience was very awe-striking to me, with Journey blasting out of these huge, huge speakers in the backseat. And I kept hitting Jimmy. I'm like, what is that? What is that? Because off in the distance, this ramp didn't look quite so treacherous as it does when you get a little closer. So, next came the King of the Hill. I went up and I competed. Do something about it. I won one of the prizes. I got a sword and I got a salmon. Fresh cut salmon. What else could you ask for? I think there actually was I think they talked about $1,000 prize money. I don't know that I actually got one. Right after I won the King of the Hill, Teton Gravity Research was up there filming their first film. And even though we had an extreme day for our contest, this was the bottom of a run called No Sticks because the guide forgot his skis. I was terrified. And the boys on top were arguing about whose fault it was. Whose fault it was that his skis were not in the heli. Anyway, if you want to see the run, you got to watch the continuum. Next, my first bonafide extreme run. You'll get to see the video of my last, what I call my last bonafide extreme run. And then, didn't we already do the and then? Oh, and then the awesome thing about my career, we moved on and we got to go do awesome things. I went to Uzbekistan and rode in this incredible, crazy, terrifying helicopter. This is one of the other few times you'll ever see me in the air in a photograph. I was all about speed and keeping my feet on the ground. There's a point to all this. British Columbia, we were some of the first to go up there, Bella Coola and Atlin, New Zealand. And by the way, when you want to get when you have a goal in life, you got to work hard for it. And those first 4 or 5 years of snowboarding, I went to New Zealand and worked at Treble Cone, teaching skiing every summer. So I was probably logging anywhere between 200 to 300 days on the snow. And I would come out here and ride bell to bell. Then I would go to Snow King and run gates on my snowboard. Anyway, I am so lazy now compared to that. So I got to go amazing cool places. So this here is how we used to pick our line, the Polaroids. So I don't even have any idea how they do it now. I think they actually spend time flying around in the helicopter so they're safe. We didn't do that. It was all about saving money. So we'd snap a Polaroid, take it home, check it out. And then we'd go back, they'd drop us off on top, and it was, you just kind of had to go for it. So regardless of the other places I went, it was always good to be back in Alaska. The snowpack was typically pretty safe. The steeper it was, the more safe it would be because it would slough and release the snow itself. Can you see me in there? I'm over there. Oh, nice work, Ron. Okay, next one. Okay, being a woman in a boy's world. This was my first snowboard, or something very similar. It was a 162, and it was like a plank. This is where I get talking about the equipment a little bit. Coming from a ski race background, the whole Sorel thing with ski boot liners in it didn't work. And then I tried I used rear entry ski boots. I took the high backs off, sorry Jeff, so I could actually fit a rear entry ski boot in the back of these things. And from there, because that was starting to limit me in, it was great for power, but really limited in flexibility and, doing cool sailfish or anything like that. So I moved to a pair of leather telly boots. There also were not too many women out there that I could look up to, other than Pippi Robbins, who was also amazing, one of the, couple dozen snowboarders here in town. Bonnie Zellers was one of the only ones out there in the world. And she, if you know much about the old equipment, you see how she's driving the back knee? That was all the way to do it. Oh, actually, I'm goofy. So, Bonnie Zellers is one of my heroes. One of the unfortunate parts about the snowboard world at the time, and prize money, it looks great, right? $3,000. It was incredible. I almost died. Steve Clausen got $10,000. Second place guy got $5,000. Third place guy got $4,000. Second place girl got $1,000. Third place girl got a basket of chocolate and a bottle of wine. That's what it was like to be a woman in the snowboard industry. The equipment I had to make the best of. As you see here, so this is one of the boards that I won one of the King of the Hills on. It was pretty wide. I have a pretty tiny little foot, a women's 7. So this actually cost me my hand one day dropping into Corbett's. If you also were here 15 years ago, Corbett's used to be tremendously different. The ski patrol put a bomb in there that was a little too big. It was right after they built the Four Seasons. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but there didn't used to be a way to side slip into Corbett's. So the large boards, which I'm so grateful to have narrower boards now, when I stood on my toe edge and went to roll in, I hooked my heel and I fell 15 feet to my hip and my head, and my hand took the brunt of it. I broke all these bones, and it's one of my only sled rides off the mountain. I did manage to ride down to Amphitheater. Anyway, so that's one of the other equipment flaws that I had. The other part about being a woman in the snowboard industry. This was my only snowboard cover. This was right after the first King of the Hill, some magazine in Japan. And I'm not even sure why it says girl, girl, girl on it. Because I can't read the rest of it. The rest of it was fashion. I actually had to do this photo shoot with actual models in Los Angeles. So it was a little bizarre. But we did get this out of it. I aspired to look like her again someday. So it was pretty intense traveling with the boys all the time. We did a trip once across the Canadian Rockies, across I don't even remember all the names of the mountain ranges, but through the Canadian Rockies, and the whole idea was to move our way across. It was me and 11 dudes. One of those was Shane McConkey's, so he always keeps it light and humorous, and Brant Moles, and there was so much snow, it avalanched everywhere we went, so it was a little anticlimactic, but I also got dragged into like strip joints and stuff. Did I say how much I love Esther Ledecky? Thank God it's not quite the same. These are some of my proudest moments, or coolest moments. My face on the side of a bus. That's me, and I think that one. Riding for Nike, I finally found a company that I could get along with. A lot of the other companies came and went. I went through sponsor after sponsor, between them being into freestyle, being into, if I couldn't put my board and the logo up into the camera, they didn't want me on their team, because that's all they wanted to say. they were like, well, we can't pay you for that because we can't see the logo. Awesome. And then Michael Jordan was my favorite athlete at the time. And when he was on the cover retiring, I got to be in Sports Illustrated. So I asked some folks on Facebook what they wanted to know if I was to give a talk. And a lot of people wanted to know what it's like to be on the top of Aranda in Alaska. Does anybody want to know? Yes. So I was kind of a head case. I was not cool and calm and zen. I didn't have a meditative practice, but I did have a pattern that worked for me. And it was basically, I saw the line, it made sense to me. I get to the top of the hill, I get sick to my stomach, I panic, sometimes I would cry. I would yell at people to shut up because I couldn't concentrate. And then really what it comes down to is being in the present. And I think this is going back to the part about inspiration and people motivating themselves to follow their hearts. You have to come back to the present to be okay with what you're doing and where you're at. And there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, who do you think? Robbie. And then of course, my family. My mom and dad, who got up and drove me all over the Northeast to get me ski racing. Here's another awesome photo of our family. But they all had something to do with where I'm at now. And of course, we've got Jeff. If you ever go up to Valdez, I don't know how much longer he's going to do it, but Valdez Heli Ski Guides, this is the guy up there that you want to be with. If you need a backcountry guide in Jackson, this is your man. He's been here longer and knows more and has seen more and can feel more out there than anybody else. And of course, our brother Jimmy, who had his own way of doing things and inspired people. I don't know. Let's move on. I love Jimmy. I miss him. And then, of course, Doug Coombs and Theo Miners. When we're talking about the big mountains, I have to include them. They brought me into Theo, you'll see in this next short, 2-minute video that you'll watch when I'm done here. Theo got me into this line that I saw when I knew all my sponsors were bailing on me. I knew the industry was changing. All they wanted was half pipe and big air. They didn't want anything to do with big mountain riders. Nike had cut me. I squandered my travel budget all year, and I went and blew it in Alaska, and I paid for my own cameraman. So this video, other than unless you've ever watched it on YouTube, is thanks to Theo and Jesse Toll, who's also passed away. So it's also pretty weird to have so many friends gone. And then, of course, the friends, the guides, and the sporters that have got me through, the creators, the people who have made the boards, Mikey Franco, who always got me back in my right mindset when I was first competing, and every time I had to go back to Alaska, and he'd be like, no, Julie, this is your process. Woo! And Robbie, of course, and Ronan. This is just me, sorry. Because I want other women to feel empowered to, okay. This may be the first time I owned it since I did it 25 years ago.
Seems to me you and me are chasing something new. What it is
someone that want to go ride that line right now? Look up like 3. This girl has ridden lines that would scare the pants off everyone in this room, I guarantee. And like I said, the first year I was in Alaska shooting for Warren Miller was with Julie, and we ended up on top of this line, and it was the first real one, and it gets real up there. Today I rode with Todd from Niche, and we went up on Pucker, and that's kind of like mini Alaska, like a way to practice and have this rollover effect where you just can't see kind of where you're going. And we were on top of this line, and we were scared, just so scared. And it was the first descent, and it ended up being called Ladies First because Julie rode it right in front of us like a boss. So, is there any questions out there for Julie tonight? Anyone? Questions? Randy?
Not a question, just a statement. You are super inspiring, and I love everything about what you just did.
Thank you.
He said, Julie Zell, you are really inspiring, and he loves what he just saw.
It's hard to kind of put it out there, and when Rob asked me to speak, I'm like, well, what am I going to speak about? So, thank you. That means a lot, because I sort of just followed my heart and followed spirit on what to share today. And that was the direction it took. Rob only gave me 4 days, not a couple weeks.
Sorry, ShredTalks is always a little off the back. And with that, let's hear one more time for Julie Zell.